Hello, my name is Douglas Matthews and I'd like to welcome you to a course for Acrylics for Beginners. Now, although it's aimed at beginners, it's also here to enhance those who already paint. Acrylics is a very easy paint to deal with, probably I think a lot easier than watercolor. So what I want to do in this video is to introduce you to the materials that you'll need and give you some ideas how they're going to be used. First of all, if we deal with the paints, acrylics can be bought in tube form and they can also be bought in these containers. I use the Dale Rowney one, System 3, which is kind of student type quality, but it's absolutely perfectly good. Generally speaking, I limit the paints to 3 different colors, which are the primary colors: blue, yellow, and red. So with the yellow, I use a lemon yellow, and that's a cool yellow, cadmium yellow, which is a warm yellow, cadmium red, which is a kind of an orangey red, and alizarin crimson, which is a more kind of slightly purpley red. In the blues, I have cerulean blue, which is a cool blue, light blue, Prussian blue, which is a cool dark blue, cobalt blue, which is a warm light blue, and this one here is ultramarine, and that's a warm darker blue. What you'll find is with acrylics that you use an awful lot more white than you would normally. For example, watercolor, you generally speaking don't use white at all. In oils, again, like acrylics, you would use much more white than any other color. So I tend to buy the large containers here. These are 50 mils, and they work out a lot more inexpensively than buying them in these 30 mil tubes. So what you also need then is a palette. Now, for me, I used 2 different types of palettes. You can go out and buy a Stay Wet palette. It's a plastic one, it costs about £15 or so, but an easier way of doing it is just to get something like a baking tray and some kitchen roll. And then what you do is pour a little bit of water over it and tilt it so that the water covers the surface, and then you pour off the excess, and then from that point you get some ordinary baking paper and cover. Now, this is the do-it-yourself equivalent of a Stay Wet palette. So you've saved yourself £15 there, and it means that the paint stays wet. Now, the other way of doing it is to get an ordinary kitchen plate like this, and this will dry a bit quicker. Now, that's the problem with acrylics. They do dry fairly quickly. You can buy an extender that will extend the drying period, but generally speaking, if you work fairly quickly, you don't really need it. Brushes. Now, generally speaking, you're using hawk hair brushes, and I usually use quite flat ones like this, some filbert, which is the rounded end, and some really big ones if I'm going to cover a quite large area. And then you have some rounded brushes, and finally some palette knives. Now, the palette knives are quite good for applying the paint fairly thickly, also for scraping off and scratching in sgraffito, where you get a scratched effect. You need a couple of water pots, just jam jars, and some kitchen roll for absorbing some of your excess paint. A roll of this masking tape is quite good, especially if you want to create a sharp horizon. As I said already, acrylic paint dries very quickly, and so you would find that unlike oils, for example, the paint will dry within minutes compared to hours and even days with oils. Acrylic painting is also pretty good if you want to continue with oils, because acrylics doesn't quite allow the slow blending of paints the way the oils would. And I often do oil paintings using an acrylic base. So I block in all the colours using acrylic base. Right. We can have anything as a surface for acrylic painting. You can use the back end of sketch pads, for example. You can buy paper, mixed media paper, which has got a little textured surface on it. And you can also buy these canvases. Now, these canvases are bought in a pack of 3, and they've been bought from a kind of bargain bookshop type of situation where they sell them 3 for £10. They are stretched on wood. And one point is, if you're using these and you get a dent in them, a lot of people think, oh my goodness, what am I going to do to get rid of that dent? Well, it's actually quite easy. All you have to do is turn it over and then put warm water on it. Just cover the whole surface under the hot tap and run it backwards and forwards and pour off the excess. And then once you've done that, you just leave it to dry naturally, and it'll once again be as tight as a drum, and you won't have any bumps in it. So, I've got mine set up on an easel here, and the paint, I'm going to put out some paint just to give you an idea. You can use the plate if you want, or since I've got this set out anyway, I'll just use that. You don't need a huge amount to begin with. One thing you do have to watch out for, though, is that when you are screwing the caps back on, you want to make sure that those caps are tightly screwed, because if they're off the thread a bit, you'll find that the air gets in and you will not be able to use the paint because they'll all dry up. So you have to be awfully careful about that. So far I've got the 3 of the blues, and I've got this big one here, and what I'll do is just take the cap off and scoop some out onto the palette, like that. Put the cap back on again. Then my yellows. So it's also quite a good idea if you lay out your paints in some semblance of order, because in the heat of the moment, you will find that you're moving backwards and forwards, and it's quite good to know that your yellows are in one area and your reds are another and the blues in another. Now, as I said already, these colours are the primary colours, yellow, blue and red. So what you will find is that if you want to make greens or purples or oranges, it's simply a case of mixing 2 colours together, and that's why they're called secondary colours. So for example, you've got red and yellow, that will give you orange, it's your secondary colour. Then you have blue and yellow, which will give you your greens. And then you've got red and blue, which will give you your purples. You can get what's called a tertiary colour, which is your 3 colours, and that is when you mix yellow, red and blue together, and that will give you brown. Depending on the amount you use, you can actually get greys out of it as well. A lot of people, especially beginners, tend to buy every colour under the sun, and that way, really, you're not learning how to mix colour. The best way to use your paint is to use it as the 3 colour idea like that, leaving an area, having got the paints on the perimeter, you've got an area there for mixing. Alternatively, you can use the plate. That will help you with your mixing too. Now, still to put some white out, what I tend to do is put out a bit of white on both sides of the palette, because that way I got white for the kind of yellowy colours and some white up here for the blues. Okay, so that's that set out. Now, before you start, if you're working on board, now the thing about acrylic paints is they've got a plastic quality, so when they dry, they're completely waterproof. So for example, if you spilled water on top of an acrylic painting, it will stay bone dry, the colours won't shift. But you can buy this here, which is gesso primer, and a primer is used for covering any kind of absorbent surfaces. So for example, if you wanted to use the back of a sketch pad that you no longer wanted, or you were getting some straw board, for example, that you're buying in a large sheet, or plywood, or even any kind of wood that's kind of absorbent, you give it a coat of primer. Okay? If you haven't got primer, you can actually use an undercoat, like a domestic undercoat. Okay? So, now what I'm going to do is just kind of start a bit of sky up here. So I'll keep my paper towel in my hand and work in some sky. So I start off with some white and then use a bit of cerulean in here and a little bit of cobalt blue. And I'm going to block in the clouds. The other thing about painting is the whole purpose of it is that you enjoy yourself. If you start drawing with a pencil, you're going to be a bit inhibited by the way you apply your paint. So the aim of this particular video and others to come is to show you that you can enjoy yourself with painting without getting too tangled up in the drawing. And that's why I've chosen sky at the moment to show you how to paint a sky. Because the sky's an impermanent thing, in as much as the clouds are constantly moving, you're getting sunrise, midday, sunset, rainy skies, overcast, you know, anything at all. But there's no way of saying, for example, that sky's wrong, because it's your sky and you do it the way that you want to. Similarly, if you were choosing between, for example, drawing a bottle or drawing a cabbage, it's easier to draw a cabbage because a cabbage is all different shapes, whereas a bottle has got symmetry in it, and anything that's symmetrical is quite difficult to draw for a beginner. So the best thing to do is to choose a subject matter, for example, a bit of a sky, where you can enjoy yourself putting on the paint, because the whole idea is to get the feeling of loose, enjoyable work. I quite often put on music when I'm painting, and I kind of conduct with my brush. So I'm kind of blocking in a bit of sky here. Now what you can do if you want is you could spray your canvas with some water from an ordinary spray that you would use for household plants. But I'm not using that today. I'm just putting in some clouds. The clouds I'm staying with the white paper, so it's a kind of negative way I'm doing it. And as you can see, the way I'm applying the brush, it's quite a big brush, it's a number 10 brush. I'm applying it, I'm kind of twisting it round as well, so that I can get different effects. The paint can go on very thinly, so you can have a run like that, where it goes a bit paler, like that. It can go on fairly thickly, where you're using very little water, and you can change the color, for example, make it a bit more cool. And up here you can tint. So as you can see, it's still staying fairly damp. I can then take some white and put in the clouds to join these areas together, and you can see that the colours are kind of blending together. So that's becoming a bit lighter there. Over here, making it a bit softer. So I've got a cloud coming in here, like that. I'm adding some white over here, and I'm putting it in fairly quickly. A bit of water. You can see I'm kind of softening that, and it's a kind of slightly kind of summery sky with nice white clouds. Like that. And what you're doing is you're making sure that the sky becomes a little bit darker as it heads towards the horizon. So I'm going to soften that there. If I imagine the horizon going to be down here somewhere, like that. Never put your horizon in the middle, because it cuts the painting in two halves. You always want to get it maybe about a third or less than a third down, dependent on the kind of view that you've got. It's always a good idea to take photographs when you're out and about because they come in really, really handy. If you haven't got any photographs to hand, then what you can do is go onto the internet and pull down some photographs from that. So there we've got a wee bit of sky done there, and I'm just going to tint that ever so slightly. I'm kind of tickling the surface. You can also dry off your brush and use it with almost nothing on, and that gives you a very, very soft effect, like that. Okay, you're just kind of dusting it, blending it in. And here I haven't actually used any white paint at all. I've left the white of the canvas. Some people may be intimidated by a pure white canvas, but if you really feel intimidated by it, mix up a very thin solution of blue and cover the whole canvas with it. You can use like a 1-inch paintbrush and just slap it on and rub it in so that you've got a base colour, and then you work on top of that. But don't feel intimidated by a white canvas because it's there to be enjoyed. I'm just going to blend that in a wee bit more there to soften it. So there we've got the start of a painting. Okay, so I think for the first lesson, what I want you to do is buy the paints, get yourself some brushes. They don't have to be expensive brushes, but don't buy the cheapest quality either. The paints I use, generally speaking, are De La Rowney, British brand, but I do have some French paints that I bought when I was in France, but I have to say the De La Rowney ones are very, very good. So that's it basically for this particular video. The next video, I'm going to be working into the sky area and creating a horizon line. Okay, so thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.